The mysterious abduction. James woke up with a start. His body felt weightless, like he was floating in water. But there was no water around him, only bright, glowing blue light. His arms and legs wouldn't move. It was like invisible hands were holding him in place. His heart pounded. This wasn't his bedroom. This wasn't even Earth. A low humming sound filled the air. Strange symbols flashed across the glass-like walls around him. The air smelled clean, too clean, like metal and electricity. Then he saw them. Tall figures with smooth, grayish-blue skin stood outside the glowing chamber. Their heads were slightly larger than a human's, with sharp, glowing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through him. They had no mouths, yet James could hear their voices inside his mind. "You are awake." James struggled, trying to break free, but his body refused to obey him. "Where am I? What is this?" His voice came out hoarse, dry. The tallest of the aliens stepped forward. "You are safe. Do not be afraid." "Safe?" James's breath quickened. "You kidnapped me. Take me back home." The aliens looked at each other, then back at him. Their glowing eyes pulsed slightly. "We cannot do that. You must come with us. It is written." James felt a chill run down his spine. Written? What were they talking about? A soft beeping sound echoed through the chamber. The blue light surrounding James flickered, and suddenly he dropped to the floor. His knees hit hard against the cold metal surface. His arms trembled as he pushed himself up. "Let me go," he said, voice firm. The lead alien tilted its head slightly. "You do not understand. We have seen you before. In our visions. In our history. You are the one." James blinked. His mind raced. This had to be a dream. Or a prank. Maybe he was in some weird experiment. Visions. History. I don't even know who you are. The alien stepped closer. Its eyes glowed brighter. "You will." Before James could react, the floor beneath him vibrated. A deep hum filled the air, and outside the glass walls of the room, a massive window appeared. James's breath caught in his throat. Outside, space stretched endlessly. A massive planet, covered in swirling purple clouds, loomed below. Strange, golden structures floated in orbit, connected by glowing blue energy beams. James had seen pictures of planets before. But this wasn't Earth. This was something else. Something alien. "No, no, no, no," he whispered, stepping back. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. "This isn't real. This can't be real." One of the aliens raised a long, slender hand. A holographic screen appeared in front of James. It showed Earth, his home, his city. Then it zoomed in, directly onto him. A perfect image of James, standing in his apartment, looking at his phone. It was like they had been watching him for a long time. James's blood ran cold. How? How do you have this?" The lead alien's voice echoed in his mind. "We have known about you for centuries. Your existence is important to us." James clenched his fists. "Why me? I'm just a normal guy." The alien's glowing eyes dimmed slightly, as if considering his words. Then it spoke again. "You are more than you think. The prophecy begins." James shook his head. "I don't believe in prophecies. You've got the wrong guy." The ship trembled slightly. A deep mechanical sound vibrated through the floor. James looked out the window again and saw the planet growing closer. They were landing. Panic surged through him. He had to get out. He had to escape. Without thinking, he lunged at the nearest alien, aiming to push past them. But before he could reach, an invisible force slammed into his chest, throwing him backward. He hit the wall hard, gasping for air. The alien didn't even flinch. "Do not resist," it said calmly. James groaned, rubbing his ribs. He wasn't a fighter, but even if he was, what chance did he have against beings that could throw him around with just a thought? The ship shook again. A soft hiss filled the air as a circular door slid open. Bright golden light poured into the room. James squinted, trying to see through the light. Then his eyes widened. A massive city stretched out before him, unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering structures hovered in the sky. Glowing rivers of energy flowed between them. Strange, flying crafts zipped through the air, moving too smoothly to be human technology. And standing at the entrance, waiting for him, was an even taller alien. Its entire body pulsed with blue energy, and its piercing white eyes locked onto him. James's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He had no idea what was about to happen, but one thing was clear. His life would never be the same again. The alien prophecy. James stood at the entrance of the alien city, his mind racing. The moment he stepped out of the spaceship, a wave of warm, electric-scented air hit him. The sky above was a deep shade of violet, with twin suns casting a golden glow over the strange landscape. Towering structures hovered in midair, connected by shimmering blue bridges of pure energy. This wasn't just another world. This was something beyond his understanding. The tall alien waiting for him stepped forward. Unlike the others, this one wore intricate golden armor, with glowing patterns shifting across its surface. Its eyes weren't just blue. They radiated light, like twin stars burning in their sockets. James swallowed hard as the alien raised a hand. "Welcome, chosen one." His gut twisted. That name again. "I'm not chosen," James said, shaking his head. "I don't even know what I'm doing here." The armored alien studied him for a moment, then turned and gestured toward the city. "Follow me." James glanced back at the ship. The other aliens stood silently, unmoving like statues. Escape wasn't an option. Not yet. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. The Hall of Prophecies. The alien led James through a massive corridor lined with floating pillars of glowing symbols. Strange creatures moved through the halls, some humanoid like his captors, others massive, with elongated limbs and shimmering scales. James felt dozens of eyes on him. Some creatures whispered in hushed tones. Others bowed their heads. "They know me." But how? At the end of the corridor, a pair of towering doors slid open, revealing an enormous circular chamber. The ceiling stretched so high that it seemed endless, filled with swirling galaxies and constellations that moved like a living map of the universe. At the center of the room stood a monolithic structure, a stone-like pillar covered in carvings. James's breath caught in his throat, because staring back at him from the ancient stone was his own face. His knees nearly gave out. "What the hell is this?" The armored alien stepped beside him. "This is the Hall of Prophecies. Your arrival was written here thousands of years ago." James ran a hand over the cold surface of the pillar. The carvings weren't just of him. There were scenes, depictions of battles, destruction, and an unknown force descending from the sky. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered. "I wasn't even born back then." The alien placed a hand on the pillar. In an instant, the carvings moved. James staggered back as the images shifted like a living story. He saw planets burning, civilizations falling, and then himself standing at the heart of it all, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy. "You are the catalyst," the alien said, "the key to what is coming." James shook his head. "No, I'm just a regular guy. I don't have powers. I don't have." Memories flooded his mind. Visions. A city in flames. A faceless enemy. An army of machines marching toward destruction. Then, himself, standing in front of the chaos, his hands glowing with a strange otherworldly energy. James gasped, stumbling backward. The visions faded, but the cold sweat remained. "What was that?" His voice shook. The alien's glowing eyes met his. "That was your destiny. The hidden truth." James paced the chamber, his mind spinning. "You're telling me that I'm part of some ancient prophecy? That I was meant to come here?" "Yes. But how? I grew up on Earth. I've never been here before. How could your people have seen me?" The alien hesitated for the first time. Then it gestured toward a floating chair. "Sit." James hesitated, then slowly lowered himself into the seat. The moment he did, the chair hummed, and the ceiling above shifted. A swirling hologram of the galaxy appeared, stars blinking like fireflies. The alien touched the image, and one planet zoomed into focus. Earth. Your world was not meant to evolve as it did. James frowned. What? Something interfered with human history. Something changed your species, accelerating your development beyond what was natural. That is why we saw you. Why we have waited for you. James's head throbbed. This was too much, too insane. But deep down, something about it felt right. What does this have to do with me? The alien's voice was firm. Because you are proof. Proof that humanity is more than what the others believe, and proof that they will come for you. James's stomach twisted. Who? A deep tremor shook the ground. Somewhere far above, alarms blared. The alien turned its glowing eyes toward the ceiling. Them. James's blood turned to ice. Before he could react, the chamber's doors burst open. Another alien, this one smaller, breathing heavily, rushed in. They have arrived. The enemy fleet is in orbit. The armored alien didn't look surprised. Then it has begun. James stood slowly, his hands clenched into fists. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't understand why. But deep inside, he knew one thing for certain. His life on Earth was over. Now he had a choice: run or fight. The hidden power within. James barely had time to process what was happening. The alarms blared like a heartbeat in his skull, each pulse of sound making the reality of the moment clearer. They had come for him. The enemy fleet loomed in orbit, and though he had no idea who they were or why they wanted him, James knew one thing. He was at the center of something far bigger than himself. The armored alien turned to him, its glowing eyes unreadable. It is time. James's hands clenched into fists. Time for what? The alien didn't answer. Instead, the floating chair beneath James tilted backward, and a series of glowing rings appeared above him. You must remember, the alien said. Only then will you understand. Before James could resist, the rings of light descended, passing through his body like waves of energy. His skin tingled, his bones vibrated, and then the world around him disappeared. Visions of the forgotten past. James was no longer in the chamber. He stood on a battlefield. A sky filled with burning debris stretched above him. Massive ships clashed in orbit, their weapons tearing through the void. On the ground, strange, towering warriors fought creatures that looked wrong, as if they had been torn from nightmares and given flesh. James's breath caught in his throat. He recognized this place, not because he had been here before, but because he had seen it in his dreams. He turned his head, and then he saw himself, or at least, a version of himself. A man, identical to James, stood at the center of the battlefield, hands raised, streams of crackling blue energy pouring from his fingertips. The warriors rallied around him. The creatures screamed in terror. James stumbled back, his heart hammering. What is this? He whispered. Your past. The voice echoed all around him, deep and ancient. James watched as his alternate self pushed forward, unleashing a wave of energy so powerful that the sky itself cracked. The monstrous creatures disintegrated. The warriors raised their weapons in victory. Then, just as quickly as it came, the vision changed. The battlefield disappeared. Now, James stood in a massive, sterile chamber lined with glass containers. Inside each one, a human-like figure floated, eyes closed, suspended in glowing liquid. A group of beings in dark robes stood before them, speaking in a language James couldn't understand. But their intent was clear. They were experimenting, changing something. James stepped closer to one of the containers. His blood ran cold, Inside, floating in the strange liquid, was him. The truth about humanity. The vision shattered like glass. James gasped, his body snapping back to reality. He was still in the Hall of Prophecies, but everything felt different. His skin burned with residual energy, his mind racing with impossible thoughts. The armored alien watched him carefully. You saw it. James's breathing was unsteady. He pressed his fingers against his temples, trying to make sense of what he had witnessed. The battle. The experiments. The other version of himself. What the hell was that? The truth. James looked up, anger and confusion warring inside him. That doesn't answer anything. Who are those people? Why did they look like me? And why do I feel like? He stopped, struggling to put the feeling into words. Like something inside him had woken up. The alien finally spoke. Because you are not the first. James stiffened. You are part of something far older than your world. Something hidden. Something powerful. A mistake that was never meant to exist. His stomach twisted. A mistake. The alien gestured toward the floating hologram of Earth. Your people were changed long ago. Enhanced. Your species was not supposed to develop so quickly. James's pulse pounded in his ears. He had always felt different. Not special. Not powerful. Just different. Like something in his body was waiting to be used. But he never knew how. And now it was awakening. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice quiet. The alien studied him for a long moment. We want nothing. But they. It gestured toward the ceiling, toward the enemy fleet waiting above. They want you gone. James's jaw tightened. Because he was proof. Proof that humanity wasn't weak. Proof that whatever had been done to them long ago had worked. And proof that humans, given time, could become something greater. The power within. The alarms changed. No longer just a warning. Now, a call to arms. The armored alien turned sharply. They are coming. James felt his heartbeat slow. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was angry. Something deep in his bones knew that this was what he had been waiting for, not just for answers, but for a chance to fight back. His fingers tingled. A small, crackling spark of energy danced across his palm. James stared at it, realization dawning. He could control it. The alien's glowing eyes widened slightly. It has begun. James clenched his fists. The power inside him surged, and for the first time in his life, he felt unstoppable. The enemy approaches. James stood at the edge of the glowing city, his heart pounding. The vision still burned in his mind. The battlefield, the experiments, the terrifying truth about humanity's forgotten past. And now, high above the alien world, an enemy fleet had arrived. The sky trembled with streaks of light as colossal warships descended from orbit, their metallic hulls reflecting the twin suns of the alien planet. These were not ordinary ships. Their design was sleek, almost predatory, dark, razor-edged, pulsing with unnatural red energy. James didn't need to ask. He knew. They were coming for him. The armored alien beside him remained still, watching the descending fleet with glowing eyes. They waste no time, it said. James clenched his fists. Energy crackled faintly at his fingertips, responding to his growing anger. He still didn't fully understand what was happening to him, but one thing was clear. These invaders saw him as a threat. And if they thought he would go quietly, they were dead wrong. The first attack. The sky erupted in fire. Enemy warships unleashed streams of burning plasma toward the planet. Massive shield generators flickered to life, forming a glowing blue barrier that rippled under the impact. The alien city trembled, but the defenses held. For now, James turned to the armored alien. Who are they? The alien's voice was grim. The Vorex Dominion. The name sent a chill down James's spine. He didn't know why, but it felt familiar. They've been watching you. Waiting for this moment, the alien continued. They feared the prophecy. Now that you have awakened, they move to erase you. James exhaled sharply. His mind raced. He was just a normal guy a day ago. Now, he was the target of an intergalactic war. If they want to fight, he said, stepping forward, then let's give them one. The alien studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then you must learn to use your power. James glanced at his hands. That strange energy still flickered at his fingertips. In his visions, he had seen himself using it, wielding it like a weapon. But right now, he had no idea how. The alien turned and gestured toward the massive structures surrounding the city. Follow me. Unlocking the power, James was led deep beneath the surface of the city, through corridors lined with glowing rooms. Finally, they reached a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. It was circular, with towering statues of ancient warriors lining the walls. In the center, a single platform pulsed with blue energy. Symbols spiraled around it, forming patterns that shifted like a living puzzle. The alien pointed at the platform. Step forward. James hesitated. And what happens if I do? You will remember. James swallowed hard. He was tired of running, tired of doubting himself. If this was the only way to understand what he was, then he had no choice. He stepped onto the platform. The moment his foot touched the surface, the energy pulsed through him. His body locked in place as waves of light surged up his spine, flowing into his mind like a flood of memories. But they weren't just his own. He saw flashes of the past, a civilization long gone, a war fought in the shadows. And the truth, humans were never supposed to be weak. Something had stolen their potential, buried their abilities deep inside them, hoping they would never awaken. But now, James had broken through. The energy within him erupted. The room flashed with a brilliant blue light, and when it faded, James stood transformed. The power no longer flickered uncertainly. It coursed through him like a second heartbeat. His senses expanded, his strength surged. And for the first time, he understood. The battle begins. The ground rumbled. Above, the enemy warships broke through the planetary shield. James and the alien rushed to the surface. The city's defenses activated. Turrets, drones, entire squads of alien warriors leaping into battle. But the Vorex Dominion forces were ready. Massive drop pods crashed into the streets, releasing towering armored soldiers. They moved with inhuman speed, their red glowing weapons tearing through anything in their path. James clenched his fists. The old James, the James from Earth, would have run. But this James was done running. A Vorex warrior charged at him, its blade glowing with crimson light. James didn't think, he reacted. His body moved on instinct, faster than any human should. He dodged, raised his hand, and released a pulse of energy. The air cracked. A shockwave exploded from his palm, sending the Vorex warrior flying backward, crashing through a stone pillar. James stared at his hand, breathing hard. He could feel it now, the control. The battle raged around him. The alien warriors fought desperately, but the Vorex forces were too many. Ships rained fire from the sky, pushing the defenders back. James scanned the battlefield, his mind working faster than ever. If they didn't turn this around, the city would fall. Then he saw it. A massive enemy warship hovering above the battlefield, its cannons charging for a final devastating strike. If that thing fired, everything would be over. James ran. With a burst of speed, he sprinted through the chaos, dodging energy blasts, leaping over debris. The power surged through his legs, carrying him faster than any human had the right to move. The warship loomed closer. James didn't slow down. He jumped. The wind roared in his ears as he launched himself into the sky, his body surrounded by crackling blue energy. He had no wings, no jetpack, but it didn't matter. He willed himself higher. The warship's cannons locked onto him. Red beams of energy shot toward him, but James weaved through them, defying gravity itself. And then, he landed on the ship's hull. Metal groaned under his impact. The enemy soldiers inside barely had time to react before James slammed his hands onto the ship's core. The energy inside him surged, and for the first time, he let it all out. A blinding explosion erupted from the warship as raw power tore through it. The ship's systems overloaded. Sparks rained down like falling stars. The Vorex soldiers on the ground looked up in shock. Their flagship, destroyed by a single man. James fell back toward the battlefield, his body glowing like a comet. He landed hard, the impact sending a wave of force outward. The battlefield went silent. The Vorex Dominion forces hesitated. For the first time, they were afraid. James rose to his feet, breathing hard. His eyes crackled with power. He met the enemy's gaze and smirked. Your move. The betrayal. Smoke and fire choked the alien city as the echoes of war rumbled through its streets. James stood amidst the ruins, his body thrumming with energy. His hands still crackled with the remnants of the power he had unleashed, the ship he had destroyed now a burning wreck in the sky. But the battle was far from over. The Vorex Dominion forces, shaken but relentless, regrouped. Their red glowing weapons hummed ominously as they surrounded the last line of alien defenders. The city's shield generators flickered, their power reserves dwindling under the relentless assault. James exhaled sharply, his muscles aching from the surge of power. He had barely begun to understand his abilities, and already he was being tested in battle. Beside him, the armored alien warrior, his guide through this madness, spoke in a low, urgent tone. We are outnumbered. We cannot hold the city much longer. James clenched his fists. Then what's the plan? The alien's glowing eyes met his. We must go to the core vaults. There is something there that may help you understand your true nature. James hesitated. The battlefield was right in front of him. People fighting, dying. He couldn't just leave them. But something inside him whispered that this was bigger than one battle. And if he wanted to end this war, he needed answers. He nodded. Let's go. A descent into darkness. The core vaults were buried deep beneath the alien city, hidden away from the surface war. James and his small team of warriors moved quickly, slipping through underground corridors lined with glowing glyphs. The deeper they went, the more James felt it, a presence. Something powerful, something watching. Finally, they reached an enormous chamber. At its center stood a towering structure, covered in ancient carvings. Unlike the smooth, advanced technology of the city, this place felt old, as if it had been built long before the aliens even arrived. James stepped forward. The carvings, they looked human. The alien warrior gestured toward the monument. This is what the enemy fears. James ran his fingers over the ancient symbols. As soon as he touched the stone, the visions returned. But this time, they were not just glimpses of the past. They were memories. The truth revealed. James staggered as the visions consumed him. He saw himself, not as he was now, but as he had been thousands of years ago. A warrior, leading a rebellion against a race of overlords. A human unlike any other, wielding energy that could bend the very fabric of reality. He saw the Vorex Dominion, but they weren't invaders. They were the ones who had taken control of humanity's evolution. Long ago, they had altered the course of human history, suppressing their natural abilities, turning them into something lesser, something controllable. The reason they had come for him now, because he was proof that their experiment had failed. James stumbled back, gasping for air as the vision faded. The armored alien's voice was steady. Now you understand. James clenched his jaw. They didn't come here just to kill me. His voice was low, trembling with anger. They came because they knew, if I awakened, humanity would rise again. The alien nodded. Yes. A new kind of fire burned in James's chest. He wasn't just some random human caught in a galactic war. He was the return of something ancient. something the Vorax feared. But before he could react, a new voice echoed through the chamber. A voice he recognized. "You were never supposed to find this." James spun around. At the entrance of the vault stood an alien warrior, clad in dark armor. But this wasn't just any warrior. It was one of their own. A member of the Alien Council. A traitor. The betrayal. The realization hit James like a punch to the gut. The battle, the invasion, the desperate last stand. It had all been a distraction. The Vorax had known where he was from the start. Someone inside the city had given them his location. James took a slow step forward, his hands trembling with barely controlled energy. "You led them here." The traitor alien's eyes glowed with eerie red light. "Of course I did." The armored warrior beside James tensed. "You have betrayed your people." The traitor's expression didn't waver. "No, I have ensured their survival." James felt his fingers twitch with raw fury. "Survival, by handing me over." The traitor exhaled, shaking his head. "You don't understand, human. The Vorax are not your true enemy." James narrowed his eyes. "Then who is?" The traitor's gaze was unreadable. "Your own kind." Silence. James felt the air grow colder. The traitor took a slow step forward. "You think you are the first of your kind to awaken." He gestured toward the ancient carvings. "These stories you see, they are not myths. They are warnings." James's stomach tightened. The traitor's voice was low, almost pitying. "You are not meant to save the universe, James. You are meant to destroy it. The choice." The word sent a shiver through James's body. "No," he said, shaking his head. "That's not true." The traitor's expression darkened. "Then why do you feel it?" James faltered. "Because deep down, some part of him did feel it. The raw power inside him wasn't just light. It wasn't just a gift. It was something vast, something dangerous. Was that why the Vorax feared him? Was that why they wanted to erase him? Because they knew what he would become." James clenched his fists. "I don't believe you." The traitor sighed. "Then you leave me no choice." In the blink of an eye, he moved, faster than anything James had ever seen. One moment, he was standing at the entrance. The next, he was right in front of him, a blade of red energy aimed at James's chest. James barely had time to react. Instinct took over. He raised his hands, and the power erupted. A shockwave blasted through the chamber, sending the traitor flying into the stone wall. James stood, breathing heavily, energy crackling around him. The traitor coughed, rising to his feet, a smirk playing at his lips. "Good. You're stronger than I thought." James met his gaze. "I'm just getting started." The truth about humanity. The traitor's words echoed in James's mind like a storm. "You are not meant to save the universe. You are meant to destroy it." It wasn't possible. It couldn't be true. But somewhere, deep inside, a small, terrifying part of him felt it. He stood in the ancient vault, breathing hard, his hands still crackling with energy. The traitor, battered but standing, wiped a trail of glowing blood from his lip and smirked. "You feel it, don't you?" he said. "The hunger, the rage." James clenched his fists. "I don't believe you." The traitor laughed softly, shaking his head. "That's what they all say in the beginning." James didn't wait for him to make a move. He surged forward, faster than any human should be able to move, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. His fist, charged with raw power, slammed into the traitor's chest. The impact was devastating. The force sent the traitor flying backward, smashing through one of the ancient pillars, reducing it to rubble. But before James could breathe, before he could even think, the traitor's form glitched. For a fraction of a second, James saw it, the real shape beneath the disguise. It wasn't just an alien. It was something else, something twisted. James's breath hitched. What the hell was that? Then, as if nothing had happened, The traitor stood up, dusting himself off. His glowing eyes locked onto James. "Good," he said. "You're finally waking up." The memory unlocked. The ground rumbled. The ancient vault trembled under the weight of something massive, an energy that wasn't coming from James, or the traitor, or even the alien warriors beside them. It was coming from the monument. The carvings on the towering structure pulsed with light, shifting and changing. James stepped back as an invisible force pulled at him, dragging him into the past. His vision blurred. And suddenly, he wasn't in the vault anymore. James stood in the middle of a vast battlefield. But this wasn't the one from before. This wasn't just a war. It was the end of everything. The sky was on fire, splitting apart as unknown horrors poured through, a force so vast that the universe itself wept. At the heart of it all stood a man. James felt his heart pound as he recognized the figure. It was him, or at least, someone like him. This past version of himself stood alone against the darkness, his hands raised, raw energy coursing through his body. The creatures, the invaders, the cosmic horrors, they fell before him, burning away in an instant, erased from existence. But then, James saw something else. The people behind him, the civilizations he was trying to protect. They weren't cheering. They weren't relieved. They were afraid. Afraid of him. Afraid of what he had become. James's heart clenched as he watched the past version of himself realize it too. He had won the war. But in doing so, he had become something else. Something even more terrifying than the enemy. The vision blurred again. James gasped, ripping himself back into the present. The vault was shaking. The traitor was still standing, watching him carefully. "Now do you understand?" The traitor whispered. James's hands trembled. This wasn't just about the Vorex dominion. This was about something much bigger, something that had happened before, and was about to happen again. The choice. James turned to the alien warrior who had been guiding him since the beginning. "You knew," he said, voice low. "You knew this wasn't just about me being the chosen one. You knew the truth." The alien hesitated. "We suspected. But now we are certain." James exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. His mind was racing. He wasn't just a warrior. He wasn't just some lost experiment. He was something ancient, something that had nearly ended everything once before. And now, he had to decide. Would he embrace that power? Or would he find another way? The traitor took a slow step forward. "You can run from it, James, but it will catch up to you. One way or another, you will become what you were always meant to be." James met his gaze. "And what is that?" The traitor's smirk widened. "A god." James's chest tightened. Because deep down, some part of him knew. It was true. The final battle begins. The ground shook again. But this time, it wasn't from the vault. It was from above. A deafening explosion rattled the underground chamber. Alarms blared through the tunnels. One of the alien warriors sprinted toward them, panic in his glowing eyes. "The Vorex have breached the city. They are coming for him." James felt his pulse slow. The choice was no longer about if he would fight. It was about how far he was willing to go. He turned back to the traitor, who simply watched him with quiet amusement. "You'll see soon enough," the traitor said softly. "When the moment comes, you'll know the truth." And then, before James could react, the traitor vanished. James cursed under his breath. There was no more time. He turned toward the exit, his hands glowing with barely contained energy. The alien warrior beside him motioned for him to follow. "Come. The final battle is upon us." James stepped forward. No more running. No more doubt. It was time to face the enemy, and himself. The final stand. The city was burning. James emerged from the underground vault to find chaos unfolding in every direction. The once glowing streets were littered with the remains of the defenders, their bodies scattered between shattered structures and crumbling towers. The sky, once a brilliant violet, was now painted in shades of fire and destruction. The Vorax Dominion had arrived in full force. Their warships hovered above the city, raining down blasts of red plasma. Enormous drop pods slammed into the streets, releasing wave after wave of armored soldiers. But it wasn't just the Vorax. James could feel something else approaching. Something older. Something worse. The enemy reveals itself. James clenched his fists as he strode forward, each step causing small tremors beneath his feet. The power inside him had grown, pulsing like a living thing, waiting to be unleashed. The alien warrior beside him spoke urgently. "We cannot win this battle. The enemy is too strong." James didn't look away from the approaching army. "Then we make sure they regret ever coming here." A Vorax squad charged forward, their crimson energy blades slicing through the smoke. James moved, faster than thought. In a blink, he was among them, his body reacting with instincts that were not his own, but had always been inside him. The first soldier lunged, blade aimed at James's throat. James ducked, caught the attacker's wrist, and with a surge of energy, sent him flying into the side of a collapsed building. The second Vorax swung from behind. James turned just in time, catching the energy blade with his bare hand. The weapon sizzled against his skin, but he felt no pain, only power. His eyes flashed with electric blue light. With a flick of his wrist, the weapon exploded in the Vorax warrior's grip, sending the soldier sprawling backward. Then James raised his hand and let loose a blast of raw energy. A shockwave erupted from his palm, ripping through the battlefield, tearing through the enemy lines like a hurricane. The Vorax fell by the dozens. James landed, breathing hard. The battlefield had stopped. Even the enemy forces hesitated, their glowing red visors locked onto him. They had never seen anything like this before. But then, a deep, inhuman voice echoed across the battlefield. Impressive. James turned toward the source. A massive Vorax warship was descending. But unlike the others, this one wasn't just a ship. It was alive. Its dark, jagged metal pulsed with something ancient, something corrupted. And from its open bay doors, a figure stepped out. Tall, cloaked in flowing black armor lined with red veins of energy. Two glowing, burning eyes staring directly at James. James knew who this was. The true enemy. The one who had been waiting for him all along. The final confrontation. The battlefield froze as the armored figure stepped forward. Even the Vorax soldiers backed away, bowing in silence. The figure's voice was a deep, vibrating growl. James Carter, or should I say, the last of the Forgotten Kings. James's blood ran cold. That name. He had never heard it before. But somehow, deep inside, he recognized it. The figure tilted its head. You have already begun to awaken. The power within you is almost complete. You have felt it, haven't you? James clenched his fists. He wouldn't let himself be shaken. I don't care who you think I am. This ends here. The armored figure chuckled. You say that, but do you even know what you are? James exhaled sharply. I know enough. The enemy spread its hands. Do you? Then tell me, James, why did your own people fear you? James hesitated, and that's when the figure attacked. A red blade of pure energy formed in its hand, and in an instant, it was upon him. James barely dodged the first strike. The air shredded around the enemy's weapon, the sheer power behind it enough to rip the ground apart. James countered, sending a blast of blue energy forward, but the enemy absorbed it. The attack vanished into its black armor as if it had never existed. James's eyes widened. What? The enemy struck. James barely managed to block, catching the energy blade with his forearm, but the impact sent a shockwave through his body, hurling him backward. He crashed into the ruins of a tower, debris exploding around him. Pain flared through his bones. But something inside him, something old, refused to give in. The awakening. James staggered to his feet. The enemy stood across the battlefield, waiting, mocking him. James exhaled, his breath steadying. And then, he let go. He stopped holding back. The power within him roared to life. Electric blue energy erupted around his body, crackling through the air like a living storm. The ground trembled beneath his feet. His vision shifted. He could see everything. Every movement, every breath, every shift in energy around him. He wasn't just fighting. He was becoming. The enemy tilted its head. Ah, there it is. James's lips curled into a smirk. Your turn. And then he attacked. The end of the war. The battlefield exploded as the two clashed. James moved like lightning, his fists shattering the sound barrier with every strike. The enemy countered, but this time, James was faster. Their battle ripped through the ruined city, their blows tearing apart entire buildings. The sky cracked with energy as shockwaves rippled into the heavens. The Vorex warriors stopped fighting, watching in awe and terror. Their master, their unstoppable ruler, was struggling. James saw the opening. One final strike. He unleashed everything. A single devastating blast of pure energy. It tore through the enemy's armor, sending it crashing into the heart of the battlefield. The silence was deafening. The Vorex forces froze. Their leader, the being they worshipped, lay defeated. James stepped forward, breathing heavily. His energy crackled around him, but he felt different, lighter, stronger, complete. The enemy coughed, looking up at him. Its glowing eyes dimmed. You are the beginning of something new. James didn't answer. He simply raised his hand. And with one final surge of power, it was over. The future of humanity. The war ended that day. The Vorex fled. The survivors of the city looked to James, not as an enemy, not as a weapon, but as a leader, as the first of something greater. James gazed at the sky, at the endless universe before him. He wasn't just human anymore. He was something more. And for the first time, he understood. Humanity wasn't just meant to survive. It was meant to ascend.